Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our academic English workshops. Now, I know it's been a little while since we last uploaded a video, but here today I'm going to be talking about something that is very useful for your academic writing, which is hedging. So my name is Kieran Williams, and today we're going to focus on how to write more carefully and critically in an academic context. So this idea, hedging, which we'll get onto in a little bit, is a key feature of academic English. And if you master it, it will help you to sound more precise, more objective, and ultimately more credible in your writing. Okay, so let's not delay, let's jump right into it. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand what hedging actually is and why it is so important. You'll also learn how to identify hedging in already existing academic texts, and you're going to use some common hedging structures in your own writing. So finally, the goal is for you to improve your academic writing style so that your arguments sound more balanced and appropriate for university level work. So the important question is, what exactly is hedging? Well, hedging means making your statements less direct or less certain. Now you're probably thinking like, this seems weird. In my essays, in my assignments, I want to sound certain, I want to sound direct. Well, that's not actually true because, well, not most of the time anyway, because in academic writing, we often try to avoid making absolute claims. Everything should always try to be backed up with evidence. So if you are making claims that are completely definite and certain, you need to have that evidence ready to go. And if you don't, well, it can make you sound a little bit strange. So, for example, instead of saying this proves that social media is harmful, we would say that this suggests that social media may be harmful. Okay, so you're always leaving it open to interpretation, open to further discussion. Okay. So, I mean, like you can see here on the screen. So the second sentence is more cautious and more academically appropriate because it allows for that kind of uncertainty. Maybe future research will show that it's not true. Okay, so it is best to leave it cautious and leave it safe by not saying something is 100%, but less than that. So there are several important reasons why we use hedging in academic writing. So first, it is to help us avoid overgeneralization. Okay, we rarely have that certain definite evidence that applies to everyone, everywhere, and all situations. So hedging also helps us sound objective and cautious, which is expected in your academic writing. It allows us to acknowledge the limitations in our own research and recognize that there may be some alternative interpretations. So overall, hedging makes your writing sound more academic and more credible. So let's look at the difference between some strong and hedged language. So you should always be aiming for that hedged language. So strong language includes phrases like this proves, this shows, all students, which sounds very definite, absolute, certain. In contrast, hedged language uses phrases like this suggests, this may indicate, many students, many customers. So these softer expressions show that the writer, who is you, is being careful and not making exaggerated claims. So in academic writing, we usually prefer these hedged versions. Now, there are several different ways to hedge your writing. And today we're going to focus on these four main types that you can see on the screen, which are modal verbs, hedging adverbs, and hedging nouns and phrases. Now, each of these helps you express uncertainty in a slightly different way, and together they give you a range of different options when writing academically. So our first option, and one of the most common options here, is modal verbs. Now, modal verbs like may, might, could help to soften your claims. Okay? So instead of saying this indicates a change, you can say this may indicate a change. This shows that your conclusion is possible, but not certain. Now, using modal verbs is this simple, effective way to make your writing more cautious. Now, another useful strategy is to use hedging verbs. Now, these include verbs like suggest, appear, seem, and tend. So, for example, you might say that the results suggest that. Now, instead of making a direct claim, you're making a softer, less certain, less definite claim. So these verbs signal that your interpretation is based on evidence, but still open to the idea of further discussion or alternative explanations. Now, the next item we're looking at is hedging verbs. Now, hedging adverbs, forgive me. Hedging adverbs modify how strong or general your statement is. So these are adverbs like generally, often, possibly, probably. And like we said, these help to limit your claims. So for example, instead of saying students experience difficulties, you can say that students often experience difficulties. We're not saying that this happens all of the time to all students, but we're saying that it often happens. And this makes your statement more realistic and less absolute. You can also hedge, though, using nouns and noun phrases and phrases such as possibility, assumption, likelihood, or any variation on those words. Now, these structures often make your writing sound more formal and more cautious, of course. So, for example, instead of saying something directly, like smoking causes cancer, you would say that there is a possibility that smoking causes cancer. This creates some distance between you and the claim, which is very typical of academic writing. So now, let's have a look at a short activity. I'd like you to read these example sentences that we've got on the slide and decide whether they are too strong, you think, or if they are actually appropriately hedged. So, for example, this first one, online learning is ineffective. Now, this is quite a strong claim. Is it ineffective for everybody, everywhere, in all situations? It's hard to argue that that is true. So we need to make it hedged. More like the second one. Online learning may be less effective in some cases. So instead of saying it is ineffective, you've made it a much smaller claim that it is less effective in some specific situations. So this is more cautious. Okay. So the second one is really what we're aiming for here. Okay, so now in this next activity, we are going to be trying to hedge some claims for ourselves. Okay. You will practice adding some hedging to some strong statements. Okay, so we got here, exercise improves mental health. Now, does it always do this in every situation? Well, that would be very difficult to claim. So we can instead claim that exercise may improve mental health. Now, this small change makes the sentence much more academically appropriate. Now, I'd like you to do the same with the other sentences that we've got here on the slide. So maybe pause the video, write down your ideas, and then we'll have a look on the next slide at some example ways we could hedge them to make them more appropriate. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide now. Okay, so for example, we had social media causes anxiety, quite a big claim, but this could become social media may contribute to anxiety. It's not the only factor. Yeah? So notice how we avoid making a direct cause and effect claim here. Now for the second one, this method improves performance becomes hopefully something like this method appears to improve performance. These changes make this statement a bit more cautious and a bit more realistic. Also, for this last one, this policy reduces unemployment. We would change to this policy may help to reduce unemployment. So this is much more limited. It may be one factor out of many factors. Okay. Maybe we cannot prove a cause and effect here. So this is a much better hedged version. Now, let's consider a longer piece of writing. Now, the paragraph on the slide here does not use any hedging, and because of that, it sounds too strong. So your task is to rewrite it so that it sounds more academic. So think about where you can add some modal verbs, where you can add some hedging verbs, some hedging adverbs, or some hedging phrases in order to soften the claims. So again, pause the video, try to rewrite it yourself using some of these hedging techniques that we've talked about. And then on the next slide, we'll look at a possible example answer that is more appropriate than this one. Okay, so pause your video now, and then we're going to go on to the next screen now. So here is one possible answer. Now, notice how the revised version uses phrases like may be harmful, can reduce, and often spend. Now, these changes make the paragraph sound more balanced and also more academically appropriate. It also shows that the writer, hopefully you, understands that these claims may not apply for all people in every situation. So we've talked about the advantages of hedging and the reasons we should do it, but there are also some common mistakes that we need to be aware of. So one of these is that overusing simple words like maybe, 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 maybe can make it sound informal. Another can be the idea of hedging too much, like you're not trying to say anything, you have no voice. Okay, so if you hedge too much, it can make your writing weak and unclear. And lastly, finally, be aware and be careful not to mix strong and weak claims in a confusing way. The key is to have some balance between them. Okay? It's also important to know when hedging is not needed. We've said it's a very useful tool, but there are some situations where we shouldn't do it. So if we have some established facts and definitions, these do not require any hedging. We don't need to say that this may be, these things are true and definitely and clearly true. So if something is scientifically proven, you can state it clearly without any hedging. So for example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius does not need hedging because it is a well-known fact. So, thank you for your attention today. I hope this session has helped you understand how to use hedging more effectively in your own academic writing. And remember, the goal is not really to weaken your argument, but to make it more precise, narrow, and credible. Right? So thank you very much, and hopefully I will see you next time for our following workshop.